Dystopias this week on Destructomundo.
Destructomundo. Witnesses to the effect that people who acted as though they were in a kind of trance were killing and eating their victims prompted authorities to examine the bodies of some of the victims. Medical authorities in Cumberland have concluded that in all cases, the killers are eating flesh. The people they murdered. Repeating this latest bulletin just received months ago from Cumberland, Maryland. Civil defense authorities have told you that murder victims show evidence of having been partially devoured by their murderers.
Been waiting my whole life for Dystopia.
Ted's back.
It's the return of Ted.
Ted is back. We're here tonight, all four of us, for the inaugural 4-person episode. We're here to Wonder Twin powers activate.
2 sets of Wonder
Yeah,
Twins?
Adam,
Or the
we'd like to welcome back Adam.
Welcome.
You can't nod on the radio.
All right.
Just speak into the little thing.
Yeah, they got the microphone machine.
Yep.
Speak into the robot.
Yeah, we want to help welcome Adam and Ted. Ted's back.
Mm-hmm.
Ted was learning the law. Ted's become.
Well, that's what I like to say.
Yeah.
So you can destabilize from the inside.
Well, Ted's becoming a judge, like Judge Dredd. He gets his flying motorcycle
Judge Judy.
and such. Yeah, like Judge Judy. Only
Does she have a flying motorcycle?
I think so. She's like one of the
so.
ones that like.
She would be like a really good villain in the Dystopia.
Sure. Well, I mean, Judge Dredd is a dystopia.
Judge Dredd is
Mhm.
a dystopia.
It's a futuristic one city.
Where all the cops are judges.
So is
That would suck.
martial law.
Yeah.
Which was much better than Judge Dredd, I thought.
It has a yeah. I mean, it does have more flesh to it than Judge Dredd did. Judge Dredd was a little bit more fast action comic book style with a lot of like, not necessarily super villains, but really over the top stuff going on, and they even went so far as to have like the forces of nature type judges, that were like evil manifestations. They had like Judge Death and can't remember the other ones, Judge Fear, and they all had like different. They looked like judges, but they were like 4 horsemen type guys and stuff. So, but where martial law had like
Bondage gear.
yeah. Right.
And an arm wrapped in barbed wire.
Yeah, because that's how
Leather
to take care of the.
Leather pants, leather mask, boots with spurs, and an arm.
So maybe you
wrapped in
should
barbed-
define Dystopia for people who
Yeah,
don't know what it
for
is.
people who didn't go to school.
Does anybody else want to tackle that? I mean, what a dystopia is.
Dystopia.
Dystopia. It's the opposite of utopia. Well, utopia is not like like the word topia or topos, is Latin, means place, but then like utopia doesn't mean good place. It just means like, unless you're considering it with an E on the front, and it would have like a good connotation.
Okay.
It would be like euphoria. Like if you took the E,
Okay. Like Europe.
or Europe, which isn't a good place either. You can't do it like that.
Okay.
But that's what it's supposed to mean is good.
But
place
yeah,
or
dystopia is it's a very, very bad place, right? In a
For
nutshell.
most people. I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah,
It's a society where for whatever reason, I mean, there's different ways that it can manifest itself, but obviously, I guess, life for the common individual is unspeakably unpleasant.
Yeah, it's very bleak. A lot of fear.
Whether it's through the actual physical victimization or just the loss of personal freedom or just
that's often
extreme poverty or lack of resources or whatever.
Yeah, fear, loss of freedom,
Lots of pollution.
lots of just bad stuff all around. But generally,
Really
they're
crappy gin.
yeah, victory gin. Yeah, he gets a good victory gin on, which brings us to probably where we should start is the granddaddy of them all. Really, is 1984. George Orwell. And in that, he's describing a totalitarian state called Oceania, and made up of like 3 different sort of countries that are banded together under that name, and then like England has become Airstrip 1, which I think is a reference to its use in World War II as like the place where everything was launched, and the reason why it's called Airstrip 1. And Winston Smith is the main character in the book, and he works in the Ministry of Truth, which is the propaganda ministry, the Ministry of Lies. Everything it's backwards like that.
Yeah.
It's like Bizarro World.
Bizarro England. But yeah, that's a place where obviously the individual is reduced to just a component in an enormous machine, basically. No one has any sort of significance to their individual life. I mean, they all exist purely
for the good of the state.
For the good of the state. And then there's the whole sort of manufactured, the war with Eurasia.
Yeah.
Which is and it's like it's continued because that gives everybody something to focus on, and they can that's the reason that we do all this stuff, and so everybody does everything to sort of help to win the war. So
yeah, also the like Goldberg and all the counter-revolutionaries.
Yeah.
All the people who want to bring down the party.
Yeah, you've got to have this. It's the us and them thing. You got to create a them to sort of solidify the us. Like if you've got the.
And it helps if you're able to control the them. It weeds out the people that you're looking that might not your thought criminals.
Yeah.
Because that's a common theme in the book, is that not only doing an action is wrong that hurts the state, but thinking it is wrong.
Yeah, you've got a society where everything is so incredibly, controlled down to the most minute details by the sort of inner circle of the elite, the few people that are really running things, and everyone else is so completely nullified almost as an individual. Like the most horribly criminal things you can do is to actually think freely about and want to do stuff that would make you happy. Everything is. So that's a perfect example.
Well, what's wrong with any of that?
If you're one of the people in power,
sure,
nothing, bro. It's pretty nice, I imagine, but.
Want a bunch of yahoos running around thinking for themselves?
Of course, there's the ever-present
they can all go to
well.
Canada if they want to do that.
See, yeah. And Canada isn't mentioned in it. Of course, no countries are mentioned by name.
They sort of do. They refer to what is obviously North America.
Well,
as
continental.
being part of the. Well, yeah, they don't mention the countries, but they mention the other part of Oceania and how.
Yeah, it's sort of assumed that maybe that England and the United States are part of one country, and I would assume, being that Canada and the United States are so close, that they became one country and one part of Oceania.
The English-speaking nations, and then you've got Eurasia, which they kind of allude to it being dominated by kind of a Soviet-style Russia, and then Pacifica. Is that the third one?
I think so.
I think that sounds right.
They just always refer to them as obviously Asian people.
Yes.
Well, then there's the ever-present Big Brother, which is the theme of the book, is that you cannot go where Big Brother is not watching you, or you think you can kind of maybe go to where the proletariat, the proles are, and hang out in the slums where they don't really monitor as much, but in the end it really turns out that everything is monitored. It's an illusion that you're able to go
it's the example of
the
sort of ultimate government involved in every aspect of your life, down to where you never have any sort of real privacy. You're never ever alone, because wherever you are, Big Brother's watching.
Yeah.
So your whole life is controlled completely. and you have no, like I said, no sense of personal freedom at all, because that would be contrary to the wishes of the state.
Yeah, and even more so the whole like reduction of language manifested in newspeak, where you're able to condense down language to its basest form, to where there's no need for thought about how to say something. If it's bad, it's not. And they do it in such a way that it's like there's good, and instead of being a different concept entirely for bad, you just make it ungood. So you have the added effect of making something bad seem less unpleasant because you're making it ungood. You have the word good to remind you what good is in there, and then bad.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the government even controlling the words that you're allowed to use.
Exactly. They're controlling your thoughts by
everything.
controlling the language in order for you to have less and less freedom over what you're able to think. Because if you're not able to think a crime, you can't perform a crime. And then that you have like the different elements of Winston Smith's becoming an enemy of the state, where he falls in love, or what he believes is love, and has a sex crime where basically he just goes someplace in the slums and then has what the state considers promiscuous sex with a person, and then
without the intention of
forget what's the girl, you've read this,
Julie.
Yeah, but he went to a hooker before that.
Yeah, he goes to the prole sector or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because they have prostitutes there. Which they seem somewhat, it's not necessarily tolerated, but sort of accepted, because they're proles, and proles are kind of subhuman, so they're known to sort of, engage in acts like that. I mean, but for someone who's not a prole to go there and participate in it is like, horrific. But
well, then there's the subsequent turning of the two against each other.
Yeah, I mean, you don't ignore. I mean, it's just, like I said, it's a perfect example of like the state controlling everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you look at every aspect of the individual's lives is controlled to the point where they can just,
including the past.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the book basically opens
the past
up
is
with
rewritten
Winston
to
writing about
to justify
the
the present. Yeah.
And inserting like soldiers' names into heroic acts in order to give the people something to read about that gives the war a good light. And
well, he was a proofreader, so he would go and, like, if someone became a non-person, he would go back and erase everything that documented that person had ever existed.
Yeah.
And so they would be like, well, that guy never existed. You're making him up.
Well, it also
Which
gives
might
us
be
a unique
thought crime.
insight into what the mechanics of the system is that the war may not even be a real thing. I mean, it's you don't ever see anybody who has fought in the war like walking the streets. You don't see the casualties of war like you would see in a mechanized war, especially one where modern medicine has prevailed, and you see like one-legged people walking around.
Yeah, there's the daily newsreels,
and then there's the occasional like rocket attack against the city, kind of like the V1, V2 attacks.
Yeah. But there's no.
But those could be engineered.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when you have
the
resistance is an engineering construct of the state, anything is possible. Especially when they give the illusion that you're not being watched in the slums, when you indeed are, because the picture falls off the wall and there's the Big Brother screen, the telescreen, showing that he's being watched.
That's it's the archetypal example of that, government totally taking over everything.
But then them having control over your basest fears as well. In the room 101 where they go and they take Julia and Winston to be tortured.
Dude, you're giving it all away, man.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
If you haven't read 1984, God, go watch it. At least watch the movie or something.
Yeah, the movie's pretty good.
The movie's good enough to, don't go buy Cliff's Notes. I can't imagine anybody listening to this show hasn't
Or you
had
could
some
go get totalitarianism for dummies.
brush with 1984 in some way or another.
Dystopia for dummies,
Right.
Or you could. Well, what about the Van Halen album?
Van Halen for dummies?
Little baby angel shouldn't smoke cigarettes. Is that what you're trying to say?
Hey, I got nothing against that. I'm not controlling people's lives, and I'm not going to tell you what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
But that's just me. I'm just like that. So
Well, they kicked David out after that album
yeah.
because of drug crimes.
Well.
James is making stuff up.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why they actually did. He was just obnoxious. But he rocked.
He rocked.
David Lee-
He
let's-
rocked way too
I'll
hard.
say it here. David Lee Roth rocked.
They were tired of his really
Not by
tight
himself
pants.
though. He needed Eddie. But they need each other. They just don't talk to each other. They don't like each other.
They just never admit that they need
It's a
each
bad
other.
relationship. But they don't work well by themselves. It's sad. It's very sad.
So that's one kind of
So
dystopia.
that's-
And then there's that basically that covers the totalitarian dystopia so well that there really isn't even any need to go any further with the types of totalitarian regimes.
Yeah, I mean,
And-
there's been other things like that, but like I said, it's the sort of a modern archetype of that.
That's like one extreme. I mean, the other extreme is like the total lack of that, which would be an anarchy.
Yeah.
dystopia.
Yeah.
Complete anarchy.
Well, there's the bureaucratic type of dystopia where you basically have like what took place in the movie Brazil, where it's like there isn't necessarily a totalitarian government controlling your every thought and action, but there is one that's trying to uphold the law or to be able to make everything conform to the law of the land, to where you have to every single aspect of your life is controlled by law.
Yeah.
So you don't have any freedom to move around.
It's just
within-
the hell of paperwork.
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
everything, everything's been so.
Everything has to be submitted in triplicate.
Yeah.
Everything has to be done to
And
the
it's,
letter, or else it gets kicked back through the machinery, and it takes forever to have anything done.
That movie borrowed a lot from Kafka,
Yeah, absolutely.
especially like the castle,
It's
where it's just like what was the castle was like some messenger had to get to some important government official, and he just have to keep going through gates and showing his papers to different gatekeepers or something like that.
It's like the DMV gone mad.
Yeah, basically.
Well, it
Yeah,
it
it's
is. I mean, it's social commentary indeed on like the style of life that the bureaucrats seem like they would want us to have. Because nothing is easy, nothing is logical. Everything's done for it's like paperwork for paperwork's sake. And it doesn't seem like anything makes sense. And then there lies the rub. None of this makes any sense. We're all doing this for nothing.
It was also kind of like a dictatorship of the mediocre.
Well, the funny thing about that movie is that the rebellion is to have things done, expeditiously. Like
Yeah.
you have
and
like
efficiently.
yeah, you have like the problem in the apartment where his everything's going haywire and nothing, and then he calls in the
guerrilla repairman.
the guerrilla repairman to come and fix his apartment, and finding that out, the people that actually do that work go and screw up his apartment even worse just to get back at him for having him there to fix it right the first time. They tear it all apart, and he's like, "I had it fixed." They're like, "Oh, but we had to unfix what he did in order to fix it the way it's supposed to be."
Yeah.
Of course, in that movie, there are parallels to 1984. It borrows sort of heavily in the visualization of it, but with him basically not wanting to be a drone anymore and working, in this office, and I love some of the stuff that happens in that with the desk being like between the two walls and like him, having to pull it into his office, and because the guy in the other office is pulling it into where he basically doesn't have any desk left at all, and the computers are just like the monitor on top of the box, and it's just the screen and nothing surrounding it, and everything you have to speak into stuff.
It's that what we have today, I guess, with like the office drone in the cubicle.
Yeah.
that sort of thing just taken to a greater degree,
Yeah, and all the
turned
stuff
into
you
like
have-
an absurd parody of it.
Well,
to show,
anybody who's ever had to deal with any type of bureaucracy can see that that's the way that things would go if left unchecked. Like, if you've ever had a job where they ask you to submit any request for days off 3 weeks in advance. I've had jobs like that, and it's awful. But it's like, who can pattern out their lives enough to where every day off they need is known 3 weeks in advance? I mean, like, as if you're going to be able to do that, and they sort of have you by the balls in that sort of situation. Where
you're just a drone.
Yeah,
that's kind of a common theme in a lot of Terry Gilliam movies. They did that in Baron Munchausen, when they're in that one, like the democratic city-state that's being surrounded by the emperor or whatever, and they're under siege. And they're like, this young man who happened to be Sting was like single-handedly repulsed an attack. Like, oh, we're going to have you executed.
Yeah.
Like, why? He's like, well, you're being heroic. That's not, in the regulations.
Yeah. He's about a bureaucracy. I think he likes to make fun of those sort of things. And then that's that type of it's a humorous take on that type of dystopia for sure. I mean, because there are subjects that can't be taken as humorously, but like you really 1984 is so bleak that it really lacks any humor at all.
Yeah.
And then Brazil sort of makes it, takes it to the humorous level, but
Darkly
it makes
humorous.
it more into satire, which is I believe is as important as a serious take, because it gives you, like, it allows you to kind of like sit, it deals with a different emotion. It's not so much a intellectual one as it is a, you feel it more than you know it. I think that's important.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, in
that
sense,
because you don't walk out of it feeling devastated.
No,
I mean,
no.
you get the point.
Yeah,
but you don't feel like you've been punched in the stomach.
Sure, by the fact that she had somebody with a cage of rats put on their face. And
Yeah,
scared so bad that it changed their personality. That kind of thing.
Yeah, it's.
But yeah, you wind up with that kind of theme, in a lot of dystopias, where it's basically fear more than anything else drives it. The main character is oftentimes very, very small, insignificant.
Yeah, I mean basically, like I said, you've got the sort of the common person is reduced to virtual insignificance. I mean, there's whether there's like one person in charge generally, or like a small group of the elite. But basically, the average person, their life is just complete and absolute shit. Whether it's active, like they're actively subjugated or whatever, like in the case of '84 or something, but something like Soylent Green. You've got basically there's the small, like the corporate bigwigs that are living comfortably, because that's mostly a dystopia due to. Is like lack of resources, overpopulation. There's pollution in the oceans, pollution on the land, so there's not enough food to go around. All the urban centers are massively overpopulated because you can't live outside the urban centers.
Yeah.
Because what little land is still good is the huge privately owned farms that produce stuff for like the few rich people. But everybody else is living in the city, and they're living off of what is effectively like
food pills.
Like the welfare handout stuff.
Yeah.
They got to go daily to get their food and water. You get a daily ration.
Well, it's the beast of mankind has become so large. It's like your only job is to feed it.
Yeah, I mean, there's
you're maintaining it. The giant machinery that has to be in place for people to be able.
But I mean, you watch
to survive.
And that movie, that movie's not like terrifically. Sci-fi'd out. I mean, it's pretty stripped down. It's pretty raw, and it's incredibly fucking bleak. I've never read that book. I've never read the book that it's based on. I have a copy, but I've never read it.
I've read it. As far as Ellison's work goes, it's
Harrison.
No, it's Ellison.
It's Harrison.
You sure?
I'm sure.
I think it's Harlan Ellison.
No, it's
Harrison who?
It's Harry Harrison.
You sure about that?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
We'll fight after the show.
Oh, okay. We'll duke it out.
We'll have a steel cage.
At any rate,
we'll have a knife fight in the kitchen.
It is a
Is
really.
that the stainless steel rat guy?
Yes.
Okay.
Did he
It's
write
co-
that? Are you sure?
It's called Make Room, Make Room.
Yeah, I knew that.
And it's written by Harry Harrison.
I've read all the stainless steel rats and I just didn't even notice. Okay, all right.
Anyway.
Maybe I haven't read Ellison.
But I mean,
don't know.
but I've seen the movie many times. It's a pretty bleak, and obviously, the end, which again I won't give away because there's somebody that has not seen Soylent Green.
Oh my God, I don't care about that guy.
I'll say it. You fucking suck if you've never seen Soylent Green. But
Oh,
Or if you
okay.
at least don't know what the movie
No. I mean, it's just the overpopulation dystopia is that.
But I mean, well, it's not necessarily just that. It's the whole. I mean, there's like I said, it's just the lack of basic resources.
Well, that's
because space is a resource. There's no space.
Space is a resource.
There's no food.
Food
There's
is
no
a resource.
water.
The fuel in order to make the machinery run.
Yeah.
All these.
Because he has to
things-
ride the little stationary bike to charge up the batteries
Yeah.
to have light. You've got nothing. You've just got
But
it's set in New York City, and the population in the movie, New York's population is like 20-something million or something. I mean,
It's much larger than it actually is now, but I
Yeah.
think they're at 11 million in New York.
But I mean, that was 73, so that
Yeah, but
seemed pretty wild at the
its
time.
its
but-
main theme is about like limited resources. And
Yeah, but then
exhaustion of those resources.
he's when he goes to investigate the murder of one of the executives of the Soylent Corporation. This guy's got this huge apartment. I mean, this guy's one apartment is the space of that 5 or 6 families would get where Thorne lives, the cop that Heston plays. This guy's got this huge apartment. He's got air conditioning and a refrigerator, and it totally blows his mind when he walks in there, that people live like that. And it's basically like a penthouse, big apartment building where all the rich guys live, and the common man, they live in squalor in huge slum rundown apartment buildings.
Notice how they eat real food.
Oh yeah, the guy's
Yeah.
got steak, the guy's got
Yeah.
vegetables. There's that
Well, I mean, he works
little
for the Soylent
little bottle
Corporation.
of
You don't know if he
strawberry
thinks-
jam that they're like, holy shit!
Yeah,
that was like
he's-
the one where and then there's the bottle of whiskey and they have the girls that live with them that they call furniture.
Yeah.
The girl comes with the apartment, and if you don't want her, you can trade her in for another one. But the apartment comes with a girl. But he's got the cigarettes. He finds the rich guy's cigarettes and he lights one up, and he's like, if I had the money, I'd smoke 3 or 4 of these a day.
Right.
It's like a big deal to get a cigarette, but it's that, the sort of rich get richer, poor get poorer type of thing taken to an incredible extreme. To where the average people just are living like animals, and but that's it's just the basic lack of resources for the average person.
And eventually, especially,
And you've got a small group of rich, the elite that are controlling all that, living quite comfortably, and everybody else is scraping by on powdered food. Little chunks of stuff manufactured by the
Soylent
government.
Corporation, right? I mean,
And handed out.
and
You
I'll
gotta go.
spoil it if you haven't even seen the freaking Simpsons. I mean, it's.
But you got to. I mean, they go every day, and you get your daily ration. You get a little bit of water,
you get a little cracker.
and you get a bag of Soylent Red
Yeah.
and a bag of Soylent Yellow, and then they have the new and amazing, everybody's
Yeah,
favorite Soylent Green,
Yeah,
and they just look like little colored crackers, but
yeah, kind of like Ritz crackers, sort of, but not. I bet they don't taste.
they're
as good.
square.
No, are they? Are they square? I
Yeah,
thought
the
they were
Soylent
round.
crackers are square.
That's been
why.
ages.
They're
since
like
I've seen that
crackers.
movie.
Yeah.
But
Like Zestas.
I always got the impression that the red one was supposed to simulate meat, the yellow
Yeah.
was supposed to simulate grains, and green was supposed to simulate vegetables.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
But the green is not vegetable.
No,
It's
No.
meat.
It's meat.
But,
It's bad kind of.
but that's when I remember as a
But
kid.
they do. I
you
mean,
know,
they-
that was a
they-
movie that, as a kid, I remember that movie vividly. That was, like I said, it's a pretty bleak fucking movie.
But
It's
in a world of overpopulation, even suicide has become like something that they're not.
oh yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, going home.
Yep. You can decide to end your life because life is terribly difficult and hard, and if you can't
Yeah, they
hold
have
your
these
weight
little.
anymore,
They have these little sort of like really mellow kind of new age clinics that you can go to where they'll euthanize you.
And if you've lived your life in squalor,
it's not like the suicide booths on Futurama.
Well, like if everything, you go home to an apartment with no air conditioning
you
in
pick
hot summer because ozone layer's destroyed, and global warming and everything else,
part.
and you're hot all the time, you're sweaty, you never get any kind of like break from it all, and then you go to this building. And they lay you out in a bed.
Well, there's
everything's super comfortable.
The thing is,
and they
like,
play the music you want to hear. And they show you a background.
When you've been in like all these crowded rooms with all these people, you get this big room all to yourself.
Yeah.
And then you're laying there on a nice, comfortable bed. It's cool. You tell them what kind of music you like, and they show you they show them the films of like fields of flowers and animals.
Yeah, you get to see beauty
like,
in a stark world where
and you just lay there and you mellow out on this couch basically. And listen, seeing pretty stuff and listening to nice music, and they euthanize you.
And that's exactly where the movie.
And they call it going home.
Because Thorne goes, Charlton Heston goes, and yet another movie with Charlton Heston in it where the world ends, and so to speak.
He had that run there, man, where he was the man.
Dude, absolutely. If you didn't have Charlton Heston in your vision of the end of the world, it just wasn't even...
When you had Planet of the Apes, Omega Man, and Soylent Green, that era there, he was the shit, man.
But he goes and he follows Edward G. Robinson's character's...
Saul.
He follows his body as it makes its way down the machinery that moves the...
Yeah, when the waste disposal squad picks it up.
And
they don't take it to the waste disposal plant.
It goes to the Soylent factory and becomes Soylent Green. And that's when, the whole Soylent Green is people.
The movie also has Chuck Connors in it.
Yeah.
The great
Edward G. Robinson, though, for a food source.
Right.
Fed quite a few people.
Yeah, that's why I love that Simpsons. It's all Soylent Green. Looks like a box of cereal, and it says, now with more girls.
Yeah, he's got the Soylent cereal.
But yeah, that's a pretty stark, bleak future where you start to see like people eating other people to live. I mean, it's all done in the.
But it's so sort of desensitized and like done in this. It's not like this crazy out of control cannibal future. You know what I mean?
No.
It's like you got to realize like how fucking sad the situation is.
Sure, your protein is extracted and put into a cracker.
That's what they have to because they realize that. But the line that they're selling is that it's coming from the ocean. It's made from ocean.
Yeah, you hear later in the film that the oceans are dead.
Yeah.
That there's nothing left. The plankton's gone.
I mean, you got to realize that what a bleak fucking situation it is to where they have to start using dead people to make food to keep the rest of the people alive. You know?
Which is a pretty bleak future. And in that movie, you had a lot of, and in that story in particular, you had a lot of like crime. Based on just how life had to be. You basically could not make it without having to commit crime. Like even Thorne had to do bad things.
Well, everybody...
With the food riots and everything
everybody's
else.
kind of looking out for themselves.
And he had to, because the amount of food you got just wasn't enough.
Yeah.
And so, like,
everybody's got to do something to get by, yeah.
And, which kind of brings us into, like, our next category of dystopia, and that's the crime dystopia, the one where crime has gotten so incredibly out of control that no longer is the criminal considered a citizen, and that his crime is not who he is. It's just something he does. But hopefully, we never really get to that. But I mean, it's considered that
I don't know, man, that'd be kind of cool.
Well, it's considered that like if a person commits a crime, he is rehabilitated, by sent to prison, not punished but rehabilitated. And if that's why they call them penitentiaries, because you're to do penance, and that's to be rehabilitated. And we've decided that that's the kind of system we want. And I mean, as far as it goes, most of the countries of the world have abolished the death penalty. There isn't the specter of all-encompassing death for everyone.
I think most of the nations of the Western world.
Yeah, most of the nations of the Western world, I should say.
It's true.
But at any rate, a certain amount of humanity is given to those that do commit crime, because they're not considered their crimes. They're considered people who have committed crimes. And in the crime dystopia, you really have the type of society that's gotten so out of control, whether through liberal lawmaking and maybe too much of a understanding of criminals, and everything's gotten so much out of control that nobody's really taking care of the problems at hand. So you have like the cases in like
what movie?
What with?
Well, you got to give a movie for an example, or nobody will know what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, okay, like Escape from New York.
Escape from New York. Okay.
There's so much incredible crime.
Everything's got to have a.
That they had to.
You got to have a pop culture reference.
Well, yeah, to where you have to.
Books only go so far.
Yeah. Like with Escape from New York, you have like the entire
like what we were started out with, like Judge Dredd and martial law.
Yeah, well, with Judge Dredd, you have like the.
And isn't that very similar?
The crime sort of dystopia with like.
But definitely Escape from New York.
So incredibly powerful imagery of like gangs running loose, and then you have like a Clockwork Orange.
Yeah.
Where you have like roaming gangs of people, and they're even dressed, and we see that in day-to-day life where people dress alike in gang,
like the Warriors.
Like the Warriors.
Well, a real life example would be those militias in like Liberia, like especially in Monrovia, and you see them like, the little kids fighting the Civil War, and they're all like wearing like, one gang's all got pink on, and one's wearing like
just total like
one guy's got like a life preserver on just because it's orange or something.
Well, then you have your bandana gangs too.
Yeah,
the Western American bandana gangs. Like, you got a red bandana, you got a blue bandana. It works like that, and then you got a black bandana, and then it's just all about that. But in the Clockwork Orange, you had like it was their English gangs, so they had to have bowler hats and white shirts, and
the one gang was dressed up like Nazis.
Yeah, and then they basically went out and committed a hell of a lot of like really hardcore crimes, rape,
ultraviolence.
Ultraviolence, a little bit of the ultraviolence. They go to the bar, drink a lot of milk, and then go beat each other.
It's not just milk; it's milk plus.
Milk plus.
And then there's like ultraviolence, rape, and classical music. Yeah.
And in that,
well, that's different from Escape from New York, which is mostly that's a gulag kind of situation.
Yeah. Well, it's a situation of where science is allowed, or not science, I should say, society has allowed crime to become so.
Society's to blame.
Yeah,
it's a fair call.
The punks run loose.
Still hurts.
You get like so many, the youth is run wild for whatever reason because there's nobody taking care of their own, as far as their children are concerned.
A lot of movies around that time of like, the kids are going crazy, gangs, but like every Bronson movie after like 1980,
Yeah, right.
Did, like
a half dozen Death Wish movies.
Yeah, Death Wish 1 through 15.
9.
I don't know. Where they're just, like guys are running around the street and they're like in the inner city and and there's nothing but like,
it
burning
was the
cars.
80s.
But the punishment is part of the really
everything
stark
like
part
Detroit.
of that type of
dystopia. It was the 80s, so you had like white people living in the suburbs, like the concept of going into the city.
Yeah,
the most horrifying thing.
The urban landscape was that of just
like there was stuff going to be burning constantly.
Yeah, like
and there were non-white people there, and they let them just walk around.
I mean,
they
shot Escape from New York in East St. Louis. And I've been to East St. Louis, and it looks like that all the time. There's plane in the middle of the,
No offense to St. Louis, but
East St. Louis is a shithole.
East St. Louis is some
and I apologize to anybody who listens to this show who lives in East St. Louis, but you live in a shithole. I'm sorry.
I'm sure you know it better than we do.
So, you get like crazy gangs. Yeah, but then you have your own little like microcosm of society going on inside like the crime. You have like the Duke of New York, and Isaac Hayes. Word to Isaac Hayes in his car with chandeliers.
That movie's got one hell of a cast.
Oh, hell yeah. Oh, yeah.
Adrian Barboobs.
That's right.
Harry Dean Stanton.
That's right. Brain.
Lee Van Cleef. Donald Pleasance.
Yeah, playing
Ernest Borgnine. Me and Kurt.
Indeed. I mean, that has always been one of my favorite movies, and like the type of dystopia that describes is one of like ultra crime, and the only way to deal with the punishment of those who commit crime is the ultimate punishment of giving them over to the criminals themselves, or dealing with them in such a way as that the punishment is almost like a crime by the state. You have in like A Clockwork Orange where he's being brainwashed into not doing crime anymore. And is that like a reasonable way to deal with criminals, is to brainwash them to basically make them to where they're docile, to where they cannot any longer commit a crime? I mean, there's always been talk of like pedophiles, convicted pedophiles being like surgically castrated or chemically castrated in order for them to...
Well, punishment goes in waves like that. I mean, when you were talking about penitentiaries before and where the word came from, a lot of those places, there were like two, in the United States, there's two different types. There's a kind where, and I think there was like the Philadelphia kind of jails, and then there was the New York kind of jails, and one of them, you just, all day you would sit in a cell, and this is like in the 1800s, you'd sit in a cell and you would turn this crank, and every day you had to turn it 1,205 times. And that's all you did all day, is turn this crank. And people were going shitbag crazy and like sticking their arms in the crank and trying to kill themselves. And they were like, "This is not working."
The Wheel of Pain in Conan.
Yeah,
it was all solitary confinement.
They had to
just go all day long.
It wasn't solitary, but I think it was like in Bombay or somewhere in India. The punishment was like they had this big wheel, and basically they climbed the wheel and turned it. And I don't know if it actually did anything.
No,
it was like
none of those.
Like a
things.
giant hamster wheel.
Well, yeah, but it was like
the stuff
long enough or wide enough for like 100 people to be on it all the time.
See, when I was
a super giant.
When I was young, like we were told that there was a place in Kentucky, like that was a camp where they sent like juvenile delinquents, and the entire thing was called the Mud Project, and it was like they would have like a hill, and at the bottom of the hill was like a ravine, and the ravine was full of mud, and they would take mud in whatever wheelbarrows up the hill and dump it into some kind of like trough.
Yeah.
And dump it into this thing. I mean, and then at the end of the day, they would dump it all back at the bottom of the hill again, like into the ravine.
Well, it's like going to Leavenworth and making gravel, that
Make
whole like thing.
Big rocks into little rocks.
It's like condemned to hard labor. But
yeah, I mean that's
that's after that. I mean, they stopped doing those solitary stuff because
the stuff like
they thought that they would. It's like you'd think about what you had done wrong while you're turning this crank. Instead, people were going nuts because they didn't have contact with anybody else, and every day all you did was turn that fucking thing. And then
the
they
stuff
would just
like
dying.
Escape from New York is like the thing where it's so bad, like the government just gives up on you.
Mm-hmm.
Like they just there's like one big giant hole that they flush them all down. There's like this place you go in.
There's no need for rehabilitation.
Everything is effectively a life sentence. Like you're just dumped in there and you're just going to spend the
and
rest
then
of
you have the fear of being a criminal because you be put into this situation where you're stuck in a prison where everybody is at, and there's nobody taking care of the thing. They build a wall around it, and that's it, and they make sure that nobody can get out, and that's all they do. So you have you have the Duke of New York running things, and then everybody like gladiatorial type battles taking place, and just crazy murders.
In the what do they call the chuds in that movie?
The ones that live like in the lower levels.
Yeah, that eat people.
Like the crazies or whatever they are that come out at night.
Yeah.
That are just like bottom feeders, but they just completely have lost all humanity, and
it's
I mean, it's pretty bleak, but if crime were to ever get that bad, or maybe you'd wind up with a situation where an area that was so crime-ridden couldn't be controlled any longer, so you basically mine the bridges that go into, and you build a big wall around it while you have the chance, and start going out there with helicopters and making sure nobody swims across, and whatever. They had a little boat in the beginning of the movie that they bombed out of the water, and they weren't putting up with that shit, man. Even though there was a huge wall, and the chances of making it up to the wall were pretty slim. Still, man, they weren't putting up with that shit. So, that was it. But then, that's along the same sort of lines as the type of dystopia where you're in a future so bleak and dark that it almost transcends like today's day and age, entirely, where you have like, things have gone incredibly wrong ecologically, and you have, people don't even remember what it was like to be able to walk outside and just have a picnic with their family or anything like that. And then you have like the kind of, they don't remember that there were trees and animals and things like that, and wildlife at all.
You mean like Logan's Run?
No, I mean more like Blade Runner.
Well, Logan's Run, they live in the bubble cities. They've never seen the outside world. They think they don't know what it's like.
That's so, like, I don't know. I mean, it's not where I was going, but
I don't know if that would
I
be
understand.
a dystopia, technically. I mean, it seems pretty bad, but all those people seem fairly happy.
But I mean, it's
run around without brawls.
I mean, I can see that. I mean,
That's more
on the surface. Logan's Run is, I mean, it seems really, but I think it's a pretty unsuccessful way to run, for a society to function.
It's a failed utopia, what it is.
I don't know. I mean, you can beam girls into your apartment.
Well, that's the thing. I mean,
it's sort of a statement of, to me, it's kind of a statement about that kind of like the narcissism and hedonism of youth gone to the, like he said, like living in a mall.
Yeah, I mean,
like everybody's
exactly
young and
what
good looking, and but I mean, it's like they're just having fun all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody really ever does anything.
And you can only live till you're 30.
Yeah, and then nobody gets old, but it's not a really functioning, successful society. Really,
nobody in the mall over 30.
But it's all about being young and looking good and having casual sex, and it's just
so like in that movie, you wind up with like there has to be a special police force that maintains the solidity of the system in order for it to survive. I suppose everybody that is over the age of 30 has to be destroyed. We're reborn, so they think they're being reborn. Because nobody is born to a natural birth. Like, everybody's kind of born in, like, they're not born in utero. So they're...
Like, the whole point of it is, like, when they escape the city and they get to the outside and they, they see the sun.
Yeah.
And they feel, like, actual warmth of sunlight on them, and they, real fresh air and trees and...
they go looking for sanctuary.
Yeah, I mean, which is the sort of the fabled, legendary place where you
living in a city where, like, or living in a society where you die by the age of 30, and you don't want to die, and you start to get old, and you get in your late 20s, and then you start to realize your mortality, even though you've been escaping it in your entire life, and then you wind up with like you start to look for a way to get out of it, and then there's the hope of sanctuary, and like then they send the Sandmen to try to find out where a sanctuary might be, and everybody who's got that little Ankh, symbol, is supposed to be.
I would think I think that's reasonably dystopian. I mean, it's not
right, but I mean, it's not just all hell breaking loose or anything.
No. But like I said, it's dystopian in that it's a failed utopia.
Yeah.
It's like a utopia with such an incredible flaw in it.
Yeah,
that it makes it a dystopia
it's
just
not
by
a
that.
really successful.
But
But what you're talking about with Blade Runner is Blade Runner.
I think
that constitutes like
I don't know if that. I mean, it is. I think probably the book it's based on is more apropos to the conversation than the movie.
Yeah,
but
I say, even the book is like it contains a lot of different elements, because within the book you've got this sort of what the movie touches on. What you're just meant is the sort of the urban decay,
sure,
which is similar to like the Soylent Green stuff. You've got the kind of the issue with resources and overpopulation, and it's got that kind of a sense of like.
Well, it's become to the point where like a replicant, an animal or a human. Well, I want to discuss more on the animal issue, like the whole thing with the snake. Is this snake real?
Well, yeah,
I can't afford a real snake.
Yeah, I mean,
you get a robot snake. It's cheaper than an actual
in the
snake.
book. In the book, that factors in much more. In the book, where they are electric.
Replicant.
Well, in the book, they are electric.
Yeah, they're
really?
all.
Okay.
Everything is.
I mean, they're all the electric animals. But that whole thing in the book is like, where there's been such a dramatic ecological destruction and devastation, to where there is very little natural life left. And then the people are so sort of disconnected from all of the sort of organic world, that it's like to have an animal is in a way it's something that sort of allows them to reconnect with this idea of that. And like obviously the regular person can't afford to have an actual animal.
Yeah.
But you've got to have an animal. So like in the book he has the electric he winds up with the electric sheep and he keeps it on the roof, and it's like it's this thing where like
it's a Furby.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
basically
they appear real and they act real and stuff like that.
But then, like, obviously, the rich people have.
Well, the
real
book
animals,
and the movie need to be taken like separately.
I mean, the book the movie is kind of it. It's not different from the book, but the book has a lot more. The movie is kind of a streamlined one of the storylines, one of the aspects of it.
Yeah.
I mean, because in the book he is hunting down androids, and it deals with a lot of the issues that are in the movie as well. But then there's a lot more. There's a lot more social.
There's the religious aspect.
Yeah, and there's there's a lot of issues with like the mass media and like media, controlling.
Well, sure.
The flow of information and how you perceive the world, and
there's also
all that, but
artificial like moods and all that stuff.
Yeah, again, it just more sort of desensitizing you as an individual.
Yeah, and then there's the underlying current of like who is real and who is not, or what is real and what is not.
Yeah, I mean, let's say the movie touches on that as well, but there's but that's something where there's problems with atmospheric radiation in the book, because it's like I said, but this idea of like being able to go up on the roof and like touch this animal, and like there being an animal there, it's like this way that people find to like reconnect with this world that's not accessible to them anymore. They can't go out like walking in the woods. They can't see birds in the air,
No.
But it's sort of this memory of like what it used to be, but obviously, real animals are just impossible for most people, so they have these electric, replicas.
Well, yeah, and then you have like Roy and his fellow replicants can't get together. Like they're 4-year lifespan. They're nearing the end of their 4-year lifespan. They've revolted and made way back to Earth to try to make it to the Tyrell Corporation, so they can try to figure out a way to get more life out of their bodies. And then they find that there's no way to do that. And then but they're still. They're actually developing emotions. They're feeling their own mortality. Probably one of the most basest of emotions is to know that one day you're going to die. And here they are. They're facing their own death, and they're starting to feel. They're worried about it, and they know that they're constructs, but they want something else. They want to know that there's going to be something afterwards. And there's the religious aspect in the book that's not in the movie as much, on the understanding that if you're real, there's an afterlife. If you're not real, there's kind of nothing, and there's no need for there to be an afterlife for those who aren't real. But these people are developing feelings, and they want there to be something, and there isn't. And it touches on the.
But it has it has multiple aspects of the concept of dystopia.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got, like I said, sort of with the ecological issues and the lack of resources, and then it's got the overpopulation, and there's the aspects of technology becoming almost a burden in and of itself. Like it's so massive. I mean, the technology is being so fully integrated into your life that it's almost starts to get in the way of you living your life, rather than it being the sort of the Victorian industrial revolution concept of like all this stuff's going to make your life better, but then it just becomes more and more, and it just becomes so intrusive. Yeah, you've got that where like you've got technology has become so immediately and like intimately integrated into every aspect of your life that it becomes all your life is. Like you wind up sitting in a room.
Well, yeah, and it's like a drug in the book, where you can't deal with getting up in the morning without going to your Penfield mood order and dialing in your mood.
And that brings us, kind of into the sort of lifestyle that's given up in Brave New World, where you have like Soma, which is the all-encompassing drug of like to make life tolerable. And then, but that has more of a
Well, this zombifies you.
Yeah, you're able to deal. There's no need for there to be like any thoughts of ill will or sadness or any kind of emotion at all, except for just one of kind of, things
There's
are
just
great.
sort of a mild, contentment, for lack of a better word. But
Yeah, I mean, it's
just kind of like you're like sort of permanently okay with everything.
It's a true opiate. It's
the
like
thing
one
is,
that you can be fine with any situation given to you because you're able to dope yourself into thinking that not thinking.
It was kind of funny that book was written way before he actually heavily got into drugs.
Yeah. Aldous Huxley was actually, he did a lot of mescaline apparently and LSD, and
I never have read the Doors
during
on
the hippie
Perception.
days.
No, he was early hippies because he died like in '63, I think.
Yeah,
so I think
yeah.
I read that recently. He was in the the psychoanalytical phase of eating a bunch of lab grade mescaline and
That's just like with Leary and his group, But I mean, in that you had classes of people, in the Brave New World. In the book, you had like classes of people based on their genetic disposition. Like,
were they all clones?
No, but they were bred. Like, if you were
an alpha,
you were part of the intelligentsia, or so to speak, you were top echelon of people.
Yeah.
You had the more involved jobs. You got to talk to people. You got to go places. You got to you had more of an executive role in lifestyle.
You were kind of like a party member.
Yeah, and you could actually go places and do things.
Yeah.
And you could have like the executive lifestyle. But then you had like gammas that were made like that they were actually dumbed down on purpose. Like they were like a chromosome was changed in them in order to make them sort of subhuman in a way. So they would be able to deal with their lifestyle of being like doing menial tasks, being in order for them to have a because if you had a menial job, and you saw people that had like a better job, you would think, oh man, they have a better job than I do, and there lies the strife. So you make people who can only have a job like this, and they feel great about it because their capabilities are only where they're at. Mm-hmm. And then you had like the epsilons that were like the lowest of the low class, where they were like the people that like shovel garbage and that kind of thing, and they were like they weren't the day-to-day like runners of society, like somebody who was a skilled laborer like a gamma. They would be more like somebody who just waste disposal and that kind of thing. So yeah, and in that everybody takes the drug Soma, which is just like an opiate, and then there's no hangover from it, so nobody ever feels like they've done too much of it or anything. And part of and in the book you wind up with people, they say stuff like they're in a meeting or something, and the meeting gets boring, and they kind of the girl in it that's a friend of John Savage, like takes the Soma to make it through the rest of the meeting because she can't even handle listening.
But
to
again,
boss
I mean,
talk.
again, that has a lot of different aspects. I mean, it has the sort of the suppression of the individual. It also has the kind of the technology becoming not a tool that we use to make life better, but something that's it's been sort of manipulated in a way that we've become its victims rather than
it's like
than its masters.
It's the type of dystopia that we described in Logan's Run, where it's like the failed utopia. Essentially, to see what the mechanisms are that's where you're making people stupid in order for them to do a job that needs to be done. Rather than them trying to strive towards a better job, you're artificially making them like stupid, so that's the only job they can do. And then you have the reservations with people like living out their lives as kind of the savages, where they don't have Soma, and they don't have like the regimented lifestyle that the people that live in the cities do, and that they don't know anything that's going on in those.
Yeah.
And then John the Savage is made into like he's brought from like the savage lands to the cities, and then like he's shown about and he actually like sees what's going on, but he can't understand why anybody would like. He's like, none of you do anything. Like he sees the futility of all of what they do. It's like everybody does everything for like just nothing. Like there's no reason for it all. So in the end, he takes Soma to try to feel, because he feels so awful about it. He takes Soma, and in order to feel, or to stop feeling what he's feeling, and then he winds up, he's like understands it. Like he commits suicide. So I mean, the whole, it's kind of rough, but it's satire. It's definitely,
It's also a poke at the trend then, and it's kind of the trend now in the psychiatric fields, where they're just like, here, just take a pill.
And that's exactly it. And then for a while, like a few years back, they actually introduced a mood-altering drug. Now, Soma is a generic term, but they made a drug that's a mood-altering drug called Soma. That's his brand name.
Well, it has something to do with some chemical in the brain that's got that as a root, or in there.
I'm not really sure what it's for, but like, are you talking about that specific drug or the name of Soma? No, I'm not sure what its name is, but like, but it is in the book a mood-altering drug, and then they go and make a mood-altering drug, but they name it Soma. It's like somebody didn't go in the fact, we probably ought to not name it that. It's gonna, it doesn't take too much of a push into making that like, sure, self-realizing prophecy there. Yeah. And then people like having a backlash against it. It's not like Zoloft or anything like that is the name in some book. Yeah. It's Soma. And that, it kind of freaks me out that they would even approach that name, but they did. I guess it's just...
It's much easier than taking the time to think up one on your own.
Well, thinking, that's the whole idea.
They don't do that.
Speaking of which,
thinking hurts, and you don't want to do that.
I was reading, just yesterday, I was rereading Neuromancer. It's written in 82, published
84.
in 82. Okay, and he was talking about one of the little technology brokers they go to on the street having plugs behind their ear like cyberware and all that stuff. But he specifically refers to it as a Microsoft.
Yeah,
it was just kind of weird that there hasn't been like a lawsuit over that.
Well, I mean, if
he had named something Microsoft,
it's not a brand name; it's a thing.
Yeah,
so
I guess just because it's a small M instead of a large M.
Well, and that I believe brings us to one of my favorite types of dystopian views, and that's the one.
Don't use that word.
It's been so overused. Yeah, it's.
But I guess you have to.
Yeah, you really kind of got but it's a. I mean, when it's Bruce Sterling, kind of came up with the whole thing. It's cyberpunk.
He's not very good. I don't like
him. I don't really like his work, but he sort of defined it. He made it like real. He made it like understandable. He was part of the group that like put cyberpunk where it's at, and then you have Neuromancer being written and William Gibson's finest work. I really like Count Zero better, but like it's like you get like Neuromancer's. Somebody else want to talk about this because it's been a while since I've read Neuromancer, but like Adam, you read it recently.
Well, I'm still reading it actually.
Yeah, but go into it for us.
Well, it almost seems old hat now because it didn't exist back then. It was like the first, there was the first mention of something.
Well,
like
it's
that. Now
the description
it's
of a society whose technology has blossomed so much that it's almost uncontrollable. Like it's a will of its own, sort of that. The type of technology available is so powerful that it has to be regulated from within. Like you can't stop it in the physical world. Like it transcends it. Like it's its own world. It's cyberspace.
And it's something that it's become so fully integrated into everyday life that you can't exist without it.
Exactly.
We're like you can't not have a computer.
Yeah.
With the equivalent, like there's no way to function outside of that effectively because it's everywhere. It's in everything.
Yeah, not just a computer, but pretty much cyberware.
Yeah,
well, you can't even have as much as a bank account without a computer.
Yeah, and they talk about how like actual cash is used mostly in illegal transactions.
Exactly.
Yeah, everything else is done, virtually. For
In fact, if you're carrying a lot of cash on you, it's considered like,
Yeah, quasi-legal.
Yeah, but I mean, technology and essentially like computerization, and it's obviously the concept of cyberspace and all that stuff. The kind of inside the computer world and all that stuff, which like he said, like nowadays, it seems cliched almost, this sort of Matrix-esque crap, but back in the day, back in the time when that book was written, it was some pretty amazing and
when a
profound
lot of people
stuff.
were still using punch cards to get programs done.
Yeah.
And you look at the concepts that he came up with, but
it's
the idea of like
late 70s idea
of it being and it all
bit.
being sort of becoming so personalized that it's actually a part of your body, like you're directly physically connected.
Well,
and you can die from using.
Exactly.
To all this technology,
and also if you do die, they can just download your personality into a what would now be called a microchip or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't remember what they called it.
Well, that's because computing power has become such
they have those
that
those biochip things.
Yeah, you're able to like simulate a person entirely, which is the reason why they have the Turing cops in there, because the simulation people can do things,
or
like,
the artificial intelligence can. Obviously, if it's artificial intelligence, it's sentient.
Yeah, that's the thing,
Yeah.
and I mean that's why the Turing cops are around. They test you to see if you're basically human or not, and there's the whole like the way they go about it and everything, and
because like AIs are effectively outlawed.
Yeah,
right. And
because they don't have
incredibly regulated.
Yeah,
well, because they
can't
want there
really
to be
like a sentient, free-thinking machine.
Except for that one in the high Earth orbit.
Exactly.
Wintermute.
Yeah.
Well, that's the part I just got to. I read the book
But-
straight out of high school, so
But
I didn't really
I think
absorb all
it's
the-
mostly sort of
Yeah,
like
it's been a long time since
it's
I've
mostly
read that
sort
book.
of a kind of a I always took it as kind of a scare tactic thing about obviously technology to develop, it needs to be unregulated. People need to be able to it needs to grow like the internet. It just needs to be created and let go. But then obviously it can get out of control.
Well, it's sort of technology run amok, but in a way that is still being. It's sort of a manipulation of people. It's so powerful that
like I
one
said,
person.
we become its victims and not its masters.
Yeah.
In the book Neuromancer, it's kind of like, Case manipulates and does all this stuff with the technology and these programs, but in fact, like 80 pages in is where I am now, they just figured out that they're being manipulated through Armitage by an AI.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I can't remember exactly, and I'm glad I can't remember. I can't remember the point that it's manipulating them. I don't really remember the plot, which is good because it's all kind of new. But,
it's a great book.
Yeah, it really.
I mean, it was the first. That was the first.
But then
it's the first of its
there's
kind.
There's also other books that are along those same lines that also touch in the same ways. That like Neuromancer is more of like the tech noir sort of dark, very hard-boiled type of futuristic novel where you have
and
like
it's
that
not
stuff
like
going on.
it's not inaccessible or anything.
And the
'cause
thing
there's
is,
ninjas in it.
And the thing is, at the time, it's really unprecedented. But later on, it actually proved itself to be a way that they dealt with people like that. Case was actually like the part of his brain that could go like into the cyberspace was taken out, so he could not go into cyberspace.
He was poisoned.
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. But then you had like Kevin Mitnick, got busted for hacking, and what do? You can't touch a computer. That's his punishment, is that he can no longer go online. He can't touch a computer.
What does the poor man do for porn?
And he actually talks about it, and he's saying it was almost impossible to I was breaking the law every day, and I wasn't even trying. Mm-hmm. It was like I couldn't really do anything without touching a computer. I couldn't make a phone call without it being a computer. He said he couldn't own a cell phone because it had internet capabilities. And to try to find dumbed down devices that he could use legally. Because, he was looking at having to go back to prison if he fucked up, and if they wanted to, they could have, sent him back to prison. He was like, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't make my way through life without having to do these things. But, yeah, I mean, you had, like, William Gibson basically described the kind of lifestyle one would have to be in order to make it through life without touching a computer, by there being computers so ubiquitous. And we wound up like he wound up being able to go back into cyberspace, but it was a surgical deal to be able to do it. And
is that where he had to go to the fin and go?
He had to. Yeah,
actually, Armitage redid it. Got him anyway.
Yeah,
but but there's I don't know if any of you have read Snow Crash or not. Snow Crash.
I've read it.
Snow Crash describes a almost the same kind of cyberspace, like or cyberpunk sort of dystopia, where the United States is essentially broken down and become bankrupt, and there's no longer like a United States of America. There is, but it doesn't really own the land that it's in, so there isn't like a United States. It's still called the United States, but like everything has sort of been like there's, instead of being like a government that controls an area, you have like the little, they're called burbclaves in the book, but they're what there are, they're the walled in neighborhoods that like rich people kind of live in, where you've got the fake gate in front. But in this,
gated
communities, and then you have
that's what we call them nowadays.
Well,
like a fair chunk of Orange County.
But they're actually their own governmental like units. Like if you live in a gated community, you have to have a passport to get in and out of the place, and then you have to be able to you're a citizen of the place. And there's all sorts of different ones. There's ones that are like white supremacist ones where only white people can live. There's ones that are like, I think there was one for Jamaicans or something like that. And then there was the one that was little Hong Kong, or it was like a little Hong Kong neighborhood. And then there was like the the main character, which is hero protagonist, that's his name in the book, which is but he's a pizza delivery driver, and he works for the mafia. He actually works for Uncle Enzo's Pizza, and Uncle Enzo's like the leader of the mafia, which is like a corporation, and they compete against other corporations, which is also like a recurring theme in the cyberpunk books. In
corporate oligarchy,
is where corporations instead of governments are really in control. There isn't, governments are sort of subservient to the corporations. They basically enact laws to work with the corporations so their ends are met.
Isn't too far off.
No, which isn't at all. I mean, but like almost every other one we've talked about is a stark statement of what is going on now. It's just taken to the nth degree.
Yeah, I mean, most dystopian fiction or just or the films, I mean, it's social commentary on the present, and I mean most the concept of the dystopia, I think, mostly exists to prove that to prove the the infeasibility of the concept of utopia.
Yeah,
like there can never be this perfect Eden-like society where everybody's just perfectly happy all the time.
Because in order to do so, you'll have to make somebody really unhappy.
Yeah, I mean, I think so the idea, the concept of dystopia exists just to prove the impossibility of utopia.
It is. It's a majority of people are able to live on the backs of the minority sort of situation. I mean, like there is like,
I think what?
Well, the majority of people are, what I mean to say is like you feel like you're alone. Like you can't like in most dystopian books and movies, you don't see like a large scale revolt of any kind. It's always one person against the masses, or the machinery that keeps in. People are, they're like, well, I can't give up what little I have to support your argument. So I'm going to go along with the majority on this and make sure that I get mine, because there's no way I'm giving up what little I've scraped together. And that seems to be a recurring theme in a lot of these. And it's just such that, like, we've,
Well, yeah, that's one of the sad things that is always apparent in it, is that, like, most of the people accept it. and put up with it. Like, as horrible as the living conditions are in whatever particular dystopia it is,
Well, sure.
people will just endure it.
Well, in the ways that they go about dealing with it.
There's the rare individual who will stand up and fight in their own, even in what small way, that even like the small resistance that Winston or that Sam Lowry in Brazil, the small moments of resistance are way out of the ordinary. Most people, you can, the most horrible, shitty, today in this, in the world, people living in horrible, shitty conditions, that they just endure it.
Yeah, it's sort of, you eke out what you can.
That's
about the best you can ever
and that's
hope
the
to
sort
do.
of the sad, so there's the rare individuals that do revolt even in small ways. They may not, tear down the evil empire and, liberate everybody, but just even the small acts of resistance.
And in very few of the books, in very few of the situations that we've described, does anybody actually try to end the system entirely. Also, they more or less try to get out from underneath it, and that's about the extent of it. It's not really like I'm the hero of the book. It's more like I'm the victim of the book, and this is my story. Because very often they don't make it.
Yeah.
They end up. Winston Smith is turned back into a drone. What was the guy in Brazil?
Sam Lowry.
Sam Lowry is basically lobotomized.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have like John Savage kills himself.
Yeah.
Well, Alex kind of makes it out sort of in an anti-hero sort of way.
Mm,
when he's brainwashed, and then he's finally like, I can be violent again.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a yay for him, boo for us.
Yeah. And I mean, like, you don't, but it's still, I mean,
most of them are just kind of like social commentary going, if we continue on our present course, this is what's going to happen in somewhere or the other. And, they exaggerate certain elements for effect.
Yeah, it's hyperbole for effect. They'll focus on one particular aspect of modern society that is, unpleasant or possibly harmful, you know what I mean? And they'll really exaggerate that one particular thing.
Well, it's also one of the reasons why I try to avoid the what-if scenario of dystopias, like the ones described in, like, Man in a High Tower or, like, Fatherland, where Nazis win,
Man in a High
sort of
Castle.
thing. Yeah, Man in a High Castle.
Yeah.
Fatherland was kind of a cool book.
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I'd like to touch on, like in a different show sometime. A sort of what if episode,
the alternate
universe,
history stuff.
Alternate history of the world. But yeah, I think that's it for us tonight, and thanks for listening. We don't have an email to read, and we're actually not in the news bunker this time. We're over at Derek's
once again.
The swinging bachelor pad.
Yes, the future pad, which is apropos for this show. It looks like 2001 in this room, and it's very, very cool.
It's my own private dystopia every day.
Right.
Yeah, I think the closest thing you're going to get to Soylent Green is Chicken and a Biscuit, which is on sale at Kroger.
Chicken and a Biscuit is great.
And it's not made out of people, as far as I know. If
it
is,
and arguably it's not chicken.
So no, it's not chicken. They're crackers hosed with sprayed. They're crackers sprayed with chicken broth.
And they're so good.
And
that's what they tell you.
They are pretty tasty.
And just so next time, we'll find out from Adam all the different Inabiscuits that there are in Australia.
Yes,
I forgot about
there
that.
are.
I think I still have the email from that.
The World Inabiscuit.
So
Australia has
we'll touch back with you about that. There's more than just chicken.
in a biscuit.
They do have Vegemite in a biscuit.
Yeah, but they can have that.
They had bacon in a biscuit too.
Bacon in a biscuit.
Those clever sons of bitches.
Well, that was like that German.
That's probably that's
bacon
crackers
flakes
sprayed with bacon fat.
All right. Well, from Destructomundo, this is James
and Ted,
Adam,
and me.
Good night.
Good night.